Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How y'all doing tonight? And today I have Mr. Steve Kulls, who is better known as the Sasquatch detective. And I love stories having to do with Sasquatch and Bigfoot and everything. But more than anything, what I like is talking to somebody that that they know. They've heard all the different stories. They've heard the crazy outlandish stories, and then they've come across the real evidence, the hard facts, which this is what everybody's always been waiting uh, for so long. And I just think personally that's just a matter of time before that happens. But again, like everything else out there, you're always going to have different versions, and unfortunately some people have claimed things that they shouldn't have, and it makes everybody look bad. But anyway, he himself, he's had several encounters, what he believes to be with Sasquatch, and he has been a researcher since 1999. And he has his own website, which is sasquatchdetective.com, which he started in 2006. um, He's been on several television shows here in the United States and internationally on the History Channel and Nat Geo. He's authored two books, and he's also a featured speaker at many events throughout the country. And he's also the co-founder of Extreme Paranormal Encounter Response Team Expert. I love that acronym, Steve. So, how's everything in Bigfoot world?
Everything is wonderful. My guys are out there doing their thing. There seems to be a lot of action going on the western part of the state, or central western part of the state lately. And I'm looking forward. Now we're into the winter season, so usually I don't get out that much in the wintertime. When I was younger and first starting up, I'd go out and be miserable out in the weather. Now I'm kind of smarter, and we work smart, and we'll gather data and keep maintaining some reports, and have my local folks scout really quick so they're not out there. And then come springtime, we'll hit it hard and running.
Okay. All right. So, in other words, yeah, because I imagine that sometimes, yeah, you can't wait for the weather to cooperate, to go out looking for evidence, right? You just gotta go out there and see what you can
So
find, I imagine, right?
it really depends on the type of family that's having a habitual encounters where every third night they're having something going on.
Okay.
Yes, you're going to want to get out there. But if somebody has like a roadside crossing, we'll interview them, and we'll wait, because that kind of behavior is the chance of it crossing at the same exact place is going to be very, to do it again is going to be a little bit on the low side. So
Right.
what we'll maintain is we'll interview and make sure it's a legitimate encounter.
Right.
And what we'll do is we'll monitor that and put that up in the area map, and hopefully we can develop some patterns. And that's really huge. And what I do now is let's develop the pattern so we know where to look, not just blindly go out there and try to find something.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you, and I'm sure you've answered this a lot of times, but how, what precipitated your involvement in making this not just a hobby? I mean, actually making this your work, as far as going and finding evidence about Bigfoot.
Well, I'll be the first one to admit this is an avocation for me. It's not. I don't do this full time.
Mm-hmm.
But what precipitated the whole thing was back in years ago, and I couldn't tell you the year, but I was just a little kid at the time, maybe about 7 or 8, and my father had turned on this newfangled thing with this corded box to the TV box office. And on it was The Legends of Boggy Creek, a true story.
Yes, I remember that.
And it starts off with this little boy about my age running through the fields, and you hear this tremendous roar, and it just captivated me. And, as I became a teenager, obviously, and kind of fell off the cart with it. The thing, girls and cars were more interesting than Bigfoot at that time.
Yeah, no, I know.
But as I got older, professional investigator, somebody had come up to me and said, "Hey, there's a book that came out in 1992 that I just picked up for the first time in 1998 called Monsters of the Northwoods." And it was about Bigfoot sightings in New York. And I was like, there's Bigfoot in New York? I was like everybody else, but the general public, thinking that, Sasquatch sightings were just a Pacific Northwest thing, and forgetting about where Boggy Creek was, which is actually Arkansas. And then I started digging in a little bit more, realizing that, there's a lot of sightings in New York State.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it all started. I guess my vocation of being an investigator kind of just precipitated it all. I wanted to get to the truth.
Okay.
Not believing that, I was probably figuring that, I bet you this is all a bunch of baloney. And as I turned out, it was not.
And what happened? Was it when you had your own personal experience, or when you talked to other people who were so credible that you're thinking, okay, there's more to than just a myth, in other words?
Well, yeah, my oh wow moment started to happen really, I want to say around 2003. Now, mind you, I read these accounts from, and actually spoke to, eventually I would speak to the police officers that had sightings up in Whitehall, New York. But in 2003, I had stumbled upon this report that I followed up on, and now that was scared out of his wits. And I am a forensic interviewer by trade too.
Mm-hmm.
Here's this guy standing and telling him the story, and I can see the hair standing up on his arms. His jugular veins are distended. He's showing me he's breathing shallow because he's reliving this.
Mm-hmm.
And he's showing me, look what I rigged up in the house in case this thing comes back. I got a big spotlight attached to a car battery.
Wow.
So I can light the whole backyard up. So this guy, definitely was shook up by something. And, Marine truck driver, this guy was tough as nails. But something shook him to his core. And that's when I first started to think that, what? This guy is not pulling my leg. This guy is telling me the 100% truth.
Mm-hmm.
He has experienced something. What it is, I don't know, but just the fact that he has, and he's lived in the same area for 15 years and never experienced anything. It was a very rural community in Rensselaer County in New York. And that tells me that, hey, there may just be something to that. And it was still another 4 years before I had my first sighting of my own.
So, and that's exactly what I mean. When you say, well, regardless of what it is, whatever, your perspective is your reality. So what you're telling me is that you could tell that as far as his reality was concerned, to him, it was the truth, that this is what he saw. It wasn't like,
exactly.
Yeah, and that's hard to fake. It really is.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is when you have a traumatic experience like that, which it was to him, you got to understand it. And I talk about this sometimes, particularly in one particular documentary I've seen, Bigfoot. I talk at length about what goes through the mind of a witness. People wonder, well, you had a camera, you had a gun. Why didn't you shoot it? Why didn't you take a picture of it? Why didn't you? Well, the fact is that if this thing is not in your belief system, it short circuits your brain for a little.
Yes.
And it's just like people that get into certain hostage situations, or they're in the middle of a robbery. People freeze because their mind's trying to process what's going on.
Yes.
And for you to see something that's not part of your belief system, it's going to take you a little bit to process that.
Yeah. When your sense of reality tilts on the side, it takes a while for your brain to catch up.
Yeah.
And so what happened? When did you have your first sighting?
My first experience was in 2000, I want to say 2006. And it was in Texas. There was some sightings, reports in this particular area, but we had gotten some hits on a thermal finder, not a thermal image, but a thermal finder. So I had night vision goggles on, NVGs, and one of the researchers was moving through an area, and I could see something stand up atop these 6-foot reeds, like, and they got the head and shoulders, and it stood up and it crouched down and it disappeared into the reeds again, and it did that a second time, and then the last time it just left, and we could hear this big rush of noise through these reeds, and we actually found like a 4.5-foot wide swath where the reeds had been just crushed down, where it had escaped out of. And at the time, it really shook me, but it was nothing compared to what would happen, 9 years later. I'm sorry, trying to think. 5 years later, in 2011, when I actually had a sighting of one with my bare naked eyes. I just lit it up with a flashlight. And, it was standing, it was a good 45-second long sighting, and I'm standing on the side of a road, dirt road, by our campsite, and we had been out, one of our research areas that we've been getting a lot of success getting audio recordings out of, getting noises, getting tree knocks, getting rock clacking, getting whoops. Actually got a couple of grunts when we left camp once. And then the following year, doing the follow-up, I'm actually sorry, the sighting was 2012 that I had, not 2011. 2011 is when we got all these sounds. 2012, and it was October. And, my team came in. We were all at the camp. I said, you know what, I'm going to go out, grab a smoke. I'm going to grab some batteries. And I grabbed some batteries, and, I shined my light down the north end of the dirt road, which is where a lot of the witness sightings had occurred over the years, down actually to the north of us. And the reason why I say down to the north of us, because the road actually goes downhill to the north, uphill to the south. And, I shine my light down there, and I don't see nothing. I swing my light around to look up the south part of the road, which was at an elevation, and there it was, standing actually next to a utility pole. And what I think it was doing was, since it's October, the leaves had dropped, it was watching our camp. And I had come walking out, and I must have just surprised it, so it did what its natural defense is, and just keep near a tree and just stay still. And when it was looking at me, because the eyes were reflecting back at me, I'm a strong believer they have a tapetum, which is the biological mechanism that gives certain animals eye shine. And in actuality, there are 12 species of known primates that have a tapetum. So it's not out of the spectrum of science that this thing may have a tapetum. Okay. So here's these eyes shining back at me. I can see them blinking, too. The first thing it did was it kind of turned and it cocked its body a little bit to look behind it, and then it kept its eyes focused on me, and I just froze. I didn't move. I just kept that light on there, and I think it was trying to process whether or not I had seen it. And then after about 40 seconds, I said, well, I'm going to do something, and I just shook the light a little bit, and it just turned and it walked in to the woods, to the south side, and eventually to the west side of the camp. And the camp would even radio in, we hear something moving back here, something large, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I get on my radio, well, get a team out here now. And when the team came out, we were trying to estimate the height of it, and we estimated it about 8 foot tall.
Okay.
And we actually had seen the cut. I didn't, but one of my teammates, who is a former Marine sniper, actually was out looking around, and he's like, hey. And we got the camera on it real quick, too, because we had a videographer. And you can actually see the dirt falling in on the print where it stepped in.
Wow.
Do you think... it was just the stuff.
Because one time I was talking to somebody about that, and I was thinking, I wonder how many times people that go out there, whether they're looking for Bigfoot or maybe they're hunting, whatever they're doing, that they're being observed by them, and maybe they just know how to camouflage so well that people are unaware that they're being watched.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of reports of people seeing creatures on the wood lines, watching them, or in the glimmer of the fire, they notice one is watching them from the forest line. Yeah. Primates are naturally curious, so to me, we're their television. They see us, they will think about how we act because we're part of the primate family as well. if you hear a boom or a bang, little animals will scamper the opposite way. What do we was that? Let me go check it out. And that's the way they are. They smell a fire, hear a fire, see
Mm-hmm.
or hear the crackling, or hear voices, or see fire. They're going to go in. They're going to investigate it, and they may just keep an eye on it because it's entertaining them. Because as primates, we need to keep our minds going. Large brains need entertainment, believe it or not.
Well, I imagine also their sense of smell is a lot more developed than ours is, so they
I
can.
would say I would say they're more attuned. I wouldn't say primates do not have a great sense of smell. In other words, you're not going to smell something 5 miles away.
Right.
But they may be attuned to it, like that doesn't belong here.
Right.
They may
Right.
not smell you coming. They may not, if you're down here, people, there's so many people that get into this. Oh, well, you got to stay downwind them. You got to mask your scent. I'm sorry, it's a primate. Primates do not have a great sense of smell. And, well, how do you know that? How do you know it's a primate? Number one, definition of a primate is articulate hands and feet, small snout, large brain. And that's the definition of a primate. And if you look at all the primates, they don't generally have a great sense of smell like a dog or a bear or a deer. And the biggest thing is that snout, because they have such. In fact, sometimes they're seen with their nose is completely flat. Well, that's where all your scent sensors are and your nerves are to pick up those kind of things. And we simply don't have the room to have enough. Now, do they have more than we do? Perhaps. That's something I can't answer. But if you think about it, we have about, I believe, and don't quote me if I'm off a little bit on this, but I believe it's somewhere around 50,000 plus, maybe 60,000, maybe 50,000 and 60,000 sensors in our nose,
Mm-hmm.
whereas a dog will have 2 million.
Right.
So that just goes to show you, so primates generally don't have that. I mean, may a Sasquatch have a little more than us? Perhaps. Maybe it's something evolutionary that they may have a few more. But just because their nose is so flat, I don't expect them to be able to smell you at a mile away or 2 miles away. But if they get a whiff of something that's kind of out of the ordinary, they may go, hey, just like we do. Like,
Oh,
I
well,
smell
yeah,
something funny.
exactly. You walk
Yeah.
into your house, let's say you know what the smells are in your house, and if you, let's say
Yeah.
you walk into your house from outside, let's say you just got home, you walk in, I don't know about you, but I immediately pick up on something that does not is not the normal smell, let's say, of where I live. You know.
Yeah, especially if my Uncle Louie's around.
There you go.
Uncle Louie, did you have something for breakfast you shouldn't have? Oh, right.
But yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
and I agree with you. They, uh, because they live the way, they don't live in so much of a controlled scenario as human beings do. That I'm sure that even if they must use the smell up to a certain point, um, because you had to have a bigger environment to live out of. Do you did?
well, you see, that's a big misconception amongst a lot of people. And I think it's infected some people that got into research to it. But they think that the Sasquatch is supernatural because, wow, well, you ever see a Sasquatch and then you look and then they're simply gone? Well, yeah, I'm sure there's people that have, but when you see a deer cross the road, and you drive by it, it jumps in the forest, you look, and most of the time, where the hell did that deer go?
Yep.
It didn't simply evaporate. It's using its natural camouflage and its natural propensity to use its environment to its advantage. And that's what I think the Sasquatch does. And there's a very simple explanation. It's not paranormal. It's not a shapeshifter. It's not a wormholing creature. It's a natural creature that just like any other creature. And I think part of that also comes from Native American lore, which, if you think about it, a lot of other animals were thought to be supernatural
Mm-hmm.
in Native American lore that turn out to be, we have answers for all of this. So, or most of it, I should say. But in this case, I think, there's nothing to me that's indicative that it's paranormal. And you have scores of people that think they're paranormal, and they have conversations with them, and, that's a whole nother crowd that can't provide a shred of evidence that they've actually, communicated with the Sasquatch, except some audio, maybe some audio recordings that are, not been analyzed really, or fall within the human range of spectrum, or um, I sat down on the log and Sasquatch came down and talked to me, and then you have the people who see them in their dreams and try.
Right, right. No, yeah, I believe me, I've heard
Yeah,
all versions of the above that you just said,
yep.
as far as to explain what their origins are, why they're seen, but none have been actually found or captured. And yeah, I've heard of it. Uh, do you find our
Yeah.
because obviously you're talking to people out there who are having sightings. Do you or is it more people that are looking for them, or is it people, let's say, going down a road, that they have more sightings? Where are they coming from?
Most of the sightings come from people that are just living their ordinary daily lives,
Mm-hmm.
and they're in the woods, or they're out on the boat, or they're driving along on a road, and there it is, and
Right.
it just seems to a lot of times to happen by happenstance and accident.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people out there that think that Sasquatch can't be fooled and that they're perfect, and they're not. They mess up, they make mistakes. Otherwise, these things probably wouldn't happen. And when you start to realize that, because I think what happens is that the people that get into this get a level of frustration
Okay.
because it is a very smart, forward-thinking, abstract-thinking animal. Because primates and moon have abstract thought and problem solve outside of the environment that they're in, or that they're thinking, more outside of where the problem is. And I think that people tend to think that because we can't figure it out, that it's got to
Right.
be another explanation. And that's, simply not true. Um, it's not by chance that, my team collectively has experienced sightings, sounds, having, objects thrown at them. In my one particular research area, I should say, it's not by chance. It's
Okay.
because there's certain ways to kind of not necessarily trick them, but it's tricking them. And if you know what makes them tick, which number one, you just know what makes primates tick, and the biggest thing is curiosity. We
Okay.
don't go running in and trying to chase them. We don't try to hunt them. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be successful if you're sitting there acting stealthy like a hunter. We may wear hunting clothes. We may wear camouflage. We may do some of that. But that's in a lot of ways to protect us from the bad animals that are out there. And we don't want to, and I want to protect myself from other people as well, because
Sure.
you never truly know where you're going. Sometimes I've been on expeditions where around the country where I've walked into, oh my goodness, you know where we are? We better get turn right around and get out. We're in a marijuana field.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
Yeah, and you better get your butt out of there, because if somebody sees you, they may liable to shoot at you.
yeah, sure.
And then you go in some places in some parts of the country, and you also have moonshiners to deal with, or people that are. So you have to be really trepidatious. It's not an easy task. It's not as fun as just running out in the woods and banging on a tree and doing a few whoops. There's we may do some of that. We may use a call blasting. We use some other sounds to draw out curiosity. One of the most interesting things is we've gotten more interesting results out of baby cries than anything else. We'll sound blast some baby cries, and that'll get things stirred up for a while.
Mm.
So yeah, there's been some really, really interesting um, events.
Let me ask you
And
something, Steve, because a lot of people, and it sounds like you said that you've had so much experience. Do you find that they're omnivores, as far as their eating habits? Have you ever found any type of evidence one way or the other?
well, I have seen evidence of I've seen evidence where they possibly took down a young cattle.
Okay.
Not necessarily a calf, but it was kind of not quite an adult, but it was in between being a calf and an adult. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that in one particular location, and it was very clear that was it a Sasquatch? I can't say with 100% certainty, but I continue as an investigator. I know who the most likely suspect may be and what the most likely suspect may not be. Is that if you look at predation
Mm-hmm.
manuals, usually bear, out wildcat, and wild dogs will take an animal down from behind,
Mm-hmm.
and you will find lacerations and marks to the hind quarters of such.
Right.
Um, the reason why we were there in the first place is because there was also some tracks found on the property and this cow pasture as well.
Oh.
And so the farmer had also said that, some of his cows have been, they've been finding them dead. And one had happened just a week prior to our departure, so it was still in the field. They left it there. And it was kind of good that it was there for a week, because the bottom side of it had gotten skeletonized. So I was able to flip it over and examine it.
Uh-huh.
And it was very clear. The neck had been broken and the jaw was broken. And to
Oh.
me, it looked like something had went up to it, grabbed it by its lower jaw, grabbed it by its upper jaw, and just snapped it. And that's what took it down. There was no
Wow.
predation marks on it. There was no claw marks, no bite marks. It looked like something had ripped into the guts, and that was about it. So there was really no. But I would believe, obviously a Sasquatch would have to be an omnivore for something that size. There's a couple of things. Number one, primates, especially large primates, notwithstanding, there's a reason why chimpanzees are a little smarter than gorillas, believe it or not,
Mm-hmm.
is because they eat meat. Chimpanzees are omnivorous. Gorillas are not. Gorillas are are herbivores.
Mm-hmm.
So they eat, mostly, leaves and plant matter. But chimpanzees will eat insects and same with us. We will eat meat, and I know we have vegans out there, but they have protein substitutes that they have to use, and that's because we need to use those. We need those proteins to keep our minds working. And really,
Yes.
in the evolutionary chain, if you look at that, we began to gain really a lot of intelligence when we started to cook our food. So there may be more nutrients released in proteins when they're cooked, and that's the reason why we've kind of accelerated our intelligence a little bit. And I think for part of the world, I think we need to start eating a little more raw meat. Let's go back a little bit,
Well.
but that's why I believe. And for obviously to maintain their body weight, they would need something to kick up their caloric intake, and you're going to get that by animal fats and animal protein.
Right. Exactly. Let me ask you, have you seen, are they solitary creatures, or do they travel, I don't want to say packs or in pods or family groups? Have you seen
Well,
it?
if you follow and I only have how primate behavior works, and yes, primates will live in family groups. They may not travel necessarily. I mean, they do travel in family groups, but during the course of the day, a lot of times, especially the males and some of the females, they'll wander around, and they'll have like a home range where they'll wander around over the course of a day or two, and they'll return to their family group. And sometimes males are looking for mates, and females are looking for, and they may travel to and from their areas where they like to do things. Like a particular family unit may like to go down to a creek and drink and grab fish, or have an area where they're quiet, and we call those foci activity areas. And if you can find one of those, your chances are a little bit better. If you find their territories, that's generally when you get the aggressive type of behaviors. You
Okay.
get the aggressive from the growls, the escorts, and stuff like that, because there's different behaviors in each one of the areas. Like a primate that home ranges generally will not become violent or angry. It will, think of the Sasquatch walking on a path that somebody runs into, and what does it generally do? It just looks at them for a second, then turns and walks the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Think of that as you're walking down the street in your neighborhood, and a neighbor passes by, and you may know them, or say a dog walks by. You don't necessarily pet the dog, but you don't chase the dog either.
Right.
Um, think of it another way too. Now you look at foci areas where the behaviors may be a little bit different depending on what the behavior is. For example, if you go to the mall, it's a foci area. Everybody goes to the mall and people congregate there for different reasons. But you go in there, and, for the most part, people are, you just move about your business the same as your home range. Now, let's change that focal area to a school.
Okay.
And if somebody or something that's not belong there, then that may cause the problem. So the foci area behaviors actually depend on what the actual event is going on. And finally, we have the territory behaviors, which if anybody strange walks into your house, you're going to be alerted. You're going to be on guard. You're going to be aggressive.
Yes.
Stranger walks in your door. What are you going to do? Get the hell out of my house.
Yep. Yep.
Reaction.
And you know what? The reason why I also asked you is like what you said when you saw about that the cow or the calf or whatever that had been attacked, and it makes me wonder. Is it like some animals either when they get old or ill, where maybe they don't have the ability to hunt, let's say, another meat source, and this was an easier. Maybe normally they wouldn't have done it, but opportunity presents
So
itself.
the way I think that a Sasquatch would be an opportunist regardless.
Okay.
There's been a lot of sightings. One of my very first sightings I investigated was in Montgomery County, New York, and in Fulton County, New York, and that was within a couple hundred yards of a dump.
Okay.
So they may hit a dump for some food. They may rummage through garbage cans. So the whole incident at Whitehall between 74 and 76, when it culminated with the police officer sighting, that too was it was rumbling around garbage cans. People thought it was a bear at first until they put their lights on it and then turned around and looked at them. And so they are opportunists. There's been reports I know that people have downed, hunters have downed deer or wild hogs, and they go to find their prey, and it's gone.
Oh, wow.
Without drag marks or anything. It's like it's been picked up and carried off.
Yeah.
And there was one particular incident in Oklahoma where they had reported it raiding its deer locker. So yeah, they are. Even in the legend of Boggy Creek, there was the farmer who had the two prized hogs that had just been lifted out of the pens and taken. That doesn't take much effort if the creature's penned.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's.
So yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it from the point of view that you always think of it, that they try really, really hard not to have contact with people. And so I was looking at it from that aspect, like, hey, this is maybe it was. Is it true? Especially down here in Florida, that we have the skunk ape? Does it have a pungent odor?
Well, that's been reported in about 10% of the cases. I myself had uncovered a track in 2006, and right near one of my research areas I'm sorry, give me one quick second here. Up in my primary research area in 2006, I had gotten a cast, and prior to getting that cast, we had been doing some calling and some knocking, and we actually heard something walking around us, from behind us, which would have been west around to the north side of us, and then continuing on towards the east side of us, and we got hit with this very awful odor, and it was one of the first and only time I've ever believed I've smelled it. And as quick as it came, it left. And it was a very skunky, musky, death-like smell. Wow. Very similar. So it hit me. I'm like, now I was also a paramedic for 5 years, and I've been in houses where people have been dead for a week or two.
Yeah, it's a special smell, huh?
Oh, yeah. But this was its own unique creature. And just as soon as it went, it left, and then 25 feet away from us, the trail to the north, here was this the track which became the fording and cast. And actually we came back a couple of mornings later, and we actually found the whole trackway leading up the hill, where it walked behind us, basically, came up around us to our north side and continued on
Hmm.
to the east.
Wow.
So really, really, some great corroboration. And I'm not a scientist. I never claimed to be. So I'm not really out there to prove, via experiment or hypotheses or anything like that. I'm an
Right.
investigator by trade. So I look at the evidence that's presented for me
Sure.
forensically, and any corroboration and MO and observations, and I make my hypotheses from those.
Right.
And to me, it's not about necessarily science. I'm just looking for vindicating some of the witnesses with what they see, or in some cases saying, "Hey, no, you saw something else," or you're pulling my leg to, you know. And very rarely will I call out somebody on a hoax. People have known me for many years to be a hoax buster and calling out. And usually I call out the biggest of the hoaxes and the most perplexing of the hoaxes. There's
Okay.
been a lot of times I've been approached by people with pictures or photographs or stuff like that, and I've kind of debunked them. And or in one particular manner, I did call it that a little bit publicly, because he had called me up one month and kept me on the phone for an hour, and I knew minute one that his story was garbage. But I was just going to let him ramble on. Okay, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. And then he called me again another time and rambled on a little bit more. Okay, well, thank you so much. I acted like I didn't act like I was a skeptic. I just listened. I was being an active listener. um, and then finally one day he sends me this picture and says, "We finally got it on trail camera." And he sends me a picture
Oh.
that I had investigated 2 years prior. So I knew he was full of, and I actually called him up on the phone. And I called him out on it. Completely fine. I was like, "Well, see, you got to get up a little early in the morning to fool me." And I hung
I'm
up on
sure
him, and
you've
that's I
seen
said,
your I'm sure you've seen a variety of, let's call it proof.
"Oh, yeah, yeah." I've seen a variety of proof, and one of the things that really kind of gets me a little torqued sometimes is, and I've seen this trend in the Bigfoot research thing, and people will go into the woods and start seeing tree bends and breaks and claim it's Sasquatch without ever seeing a Sasquatch or having any tracks nearby it or any scat or fecal matter or hair samples or anything
Mm-hmm.
to go along with those breaks. And I've seen some tree bends, and people think that a Sasquatch can just take a tree, bend it over, and it stays that way. When in actuality, it takes several weeks for a tree to continue to grow that way and have to be tied down. And the most common explanation of that is ice. And,
Oh.
ice will weigh down a tree and
And
it will
just
bend over. And by the
uh-huh.
time the ice melts, especially if the ice is early on in the season, and the ice melts, and then the tree is naturally bent like that now and won't straighten back up. So,
Yeah,
a
never thought of
Sasquatch
that.
can't bend a tree and keep it that way. It just doesn't happen that way. And especially if a tree falls on another tree and it arches it, it doesn't snap the tree, but it arches it,
And
and
it,
then eventually the tree that fell over dies and decays. Now
mm-hmm.
you have, and now you have this bent over tree, and too many people are like, "Look at that arch, that's a Sasquatch." No, let's look at this. Now I've seen some tree breaks that have twists in them that are at an acceptable level. And I'm like, well, yeah, that could be, or a tree break, yeah, that could be, especially if you're in an area where there is a lot of sighting activity. Or somebody sees it enter the brush from this way, and you actually track it like a hunter, like you would track a moose or a deer or a
Mm-hmm.
bear or a coyote or any other animal in the woods. And if you track the breaks via that way, that's fine and dandy too. That's all legit. But what does that have in common is it has a sighting attached to it. You just can't go traipsing into the woods and say, "This is Bigfoot," because of the tree break. You got to have a lot more on the table. And I've seen websites dedicated to these tree breaks. No matter where they go, they're, "Oh, look at this. Well, there's a squatch out here. Look at this tree bed. Look at that tree bed. Hogwash. Hogwash." So I tend not to peruse many sites
So
these
the branch
days.
theory doesn't
I
fly
just
for you. And I know because
I just
I've seen
keep
that,
to myself.
I've seen that on yeah, and when you said that thing about the snow, I was like, God, he's right. My God. But see, I live in Florida, so but when you point that
Yeah.
out, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, as a matter of fact. Wow.
Well, the interesting thing too is, and this is a little interesting fact that I found out. As far as I'm not quite sure if the skunk ape smells as musky. Usually, it smells very skunk-like in Death Lake in Florida. The interesting thing is that the further north you go, the more you get people that it smells with a little musk to it, like has a musk smell to it as well. And the funny thing is that a lot of sightings that I have investigated that are bona fide legit were there was always apple orchards nearby. The Vermont Trail Cam photo has one picking an apple up. Near baby footage, you can see the apple trees in the background. It happened outside of apple orchard. The incident in A Bear Road, at the end of A Bear Road, was an apple orchard. We also had a flap in 2006 in Whitehall that was all right near an apple orchard as well. And there is a chemical that breaks down the apple. And the funny thing is that Jane Goodall, when she was habituating the chimpanzees to get used to her, she was giving them apples.
Okay.
And they would take the apples they want, and then they would come back the next day. And then after a while, she noticed they liked the rotting apples better than they did the fresh ones.
Really?
And that's because the rotting ones became fermented.
Are you?
So they were getting a buzz off that, and the chimps would rather take the ones that had the buzz. Again, find it. We're all not we're all in the same group.
Yeah,
So,
you're right. You're right.
So the funny thing is, in doing research, what makes an apple ferment is an alcohol called, I believe, ethol.
Okay.
And in its pure form, smells like musk. So could it be possible, like if we eat too much garlic or onions,
right. It comes out through your pores.
Right? Does a Sasquatch that has a very rich apple diet, does that make it give a musk, rich fermented apple diet? Could it make it sweat out the sea fog, which in its pure form smells like musk?
God, that is such a great theory. That is great.
Yep, and it's that was all done when I did research for my book, What Would Sasquatch Do? And when I write a book, I kind of write it and I work it. I write it and I work it, and you work it. And that's the fun thing I like about writing these type of books. You start digging into more and digging into more. So when I start a book, I don't have it start to finish. I don't know where it's going to take me. It's a road.
It's a work in progress.
It's a road trip. You don't know. I know where I want to end up, and I know where the route I want to travel, but you never know where the side roads will take me sometimes. And that was one of the side roads that I did when that happened when I wrote What Would Sasquatch Do? Because I was like, the caloric intake of these apples, and I wanted to get in the caloric intake. And then I started reading more and more and more, and I wonder what the chemical is that breaks it down, because that whole Jane Goodall story is kind of fascinating. And then all of a sudden there's the little thing about it smelling like musk in its natural form, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Steve, let me ask you something. Now that you mentioned that theory about the apple and the fermentation, and I think that's that's incredible, but that is so plausible. Do you think, because you know that all over the United States there seems to be a different version of Bigfoot that they've got given their own name to, whether it's because of the coloring? Do you think that, in other words, that it's just adaptations that they've done because of the area that they live in?
You're right on point with that. As you look at, let's look at Homo sapiens, us, as a particular species of primates, which Sasquatch would be. Well, do we not have different races? Do we not have different sizes? We are dimorphic, so we have different sizes, different shapes. I mean, Samoans are generally larger people. Pygmies are very small people. And a lot of that is dependent on several things. Could there be several races of Sasquatch, like there are several races of Homo sapiens? Absolutely. Can I prove that? No. But what I can say is that, there are adaptations that take place due to environmental factors, due to calorie intake factors and nutritional factors.
Yes.
For example, a lot of people don't know the average South Korean is 5'9", whereas the average North Korean is 5'7", because of the nutrition.
The nutritional, yes.
Yeah, they obviously they get a lot less food in North Korea, except their leader, who tends to look like a Samoan
exactly
now,
right.
but
Yeah.
kind of looks like the bad-eared blimp. But the
We know where all the food's
but
going.
that's right, we do, right to his plate. I mean, even his generals are skinny. No, I'm sorry. Now I've just gotten a death sentence in North Korea because of that.
Dun 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 dun. Okay.
But realistically, there is such dimorphism in the Sasquatch, and that, like I said, from what I understand, the height of a skunk ape is a little bit shorter than that of, say, a Sasquatch in the Northeast. And the Sasquatch in the Northeast is a lot more slender than, per se, the Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
So, you look at some of those factors. There's been reportings of white Sasquatch, which would give indications of perhaps an albinoism. There's been reports of, the Vermont trail cams photos. There are patches we believe are white. They could be very dark, too, in that the infrared is just playing games and reverse the color. But it's entirely possible that they could have vitiligo, which is, for people that don't know what vitiligo is you ever see somebody with dark hair, and they have this one little white patch that you may think, oh, they have some gray hair there. No, that's actually vitiligo. It's white hair, and that actually goes right to the skin follicle in their head. It actually it's a pigmentation problem. And, that's where that comes from. So, there have been reports now of them having, and they're very natural to primates in general. So, it's nothing when I wrote What Would Sasquatch Do, I did nothing that was like more than one step out of science. If it was more than one step out of science, I had to disqualify it.
Okay.
There are people who say that, for example, the tapetum, and, there are 12 primate species that have a tapetum. So it makes sense that if we're seeing all this eye shine, that there is a tapetum.
Right. Okay.
This creature, right? There's been other things that people think, I think their eyes bioluminesce. Well, unfortunately, there is no primate that can bioluminesce. There is no mammal that can bioluminesce. And
Okay.
that's usually some fish and some invertebrates that can bioluminesce.
Right.
So the likelihood of that is very slim, and it's not really worth mentioning.
Exactly. There's nothing to back up that conclusion if that's where you're going with it. And I see what you're saying as far as using,
right.
at least, short of having captured one, when you have all these reports.
Right. Let's use what we do know. If this exists, it's going to be a primate, so it should fall into these categories, and it should do this. And believe it or not, its behavior kind of falls right in line with other primates. One of the other things I love to mention, and I just completely lost my train of thought, but it's very similar into the lines of infrasound, for example. There's been a lot of talk about people having Bigfoot talk to them, or them telepathically, or they see them and they get this pit in their stomach, or they before they actually have an actual sighting, they may actually feel like they're being watched, perhaps. Well, the funny thing is there is something called infrasound, and there has been some suggestion that Sasquatch is an infrasound, and really, the folks that put forth this thing, they would say, cats can use infrasound, and lions can use infrasound, cats, but the big cats, the big blue whale can use infrasound. Maybe a Sasquatch uses infrasound. Well, what information do we have to kind of scientifically back that up just a little bit? Pretty simple. Usually in mammals, the biggest animal of that particular order can use infrasound. The blue whale can use infrasound. It's the biggest whale. Lions and tigers can use Infrasound, they're the biggest feline, the biggest elephant. The elephant, which has its own, believe it or not, has its own order, that can use infrasound. So it makes sense that if the biggest mammal in all the different species can use infrasound, is it, and the Sasquatch definitely would be considered the biggest primate.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot of sense, and it makes it within the realm of possibility. And that may explain why some people feel they're having a telepathic experience too.
Exactly. Right.
But
And it's just not, and I understand what you're saying because you really don't know what the source of how you're getting this knowledge. So you're putting it on the psychic network kind of deal. But I know what you're saying.
yep.
Steve, have you ever heard of anybody, let's say, who's had a farm or a piece of land that sits right on the edge of a lot of wooded area for a long time, where they will say, hey, I know that either I've had one or a family of Sasquatch interacting with them for years, not like maybe even visibly, but that they basically coexist side by side but apart is what I'm saying.
There's been some reports of some people that have made some claims to that. Now, whether or not it's true, um, you got to have some evidence to back that up
Hmm.
normally. So I'm not quite sure.
Okay, because and the reason why I say this is I imagine that would have to happen after that somebody that's been there quite a while, and like you said, they're not running around trying to catch it or hunt it or do anything of the above, you know. And it's like, okay, yeah, those humans over there, they're not gonna run after us, so they kind of like, and I don't know, do you have any information whether as far as if they're territorial, do they migrate, uh, anything like that along those lines?
Well, if you look at the Aboriginal folks, they do tend to migrate.
Mm-hmm.
Even Native Americans will migrate. Evidence has shown that even primates will migrate depending on food source and food availability and weather, climate. Now, will a Sasquatch migrate to Florida or go south from winter? No, I don't think it's much like that. It may
Mm-hmm.
be a short migratory path to an area like we believe they might go from the Adirondack State Park to the which our area is covered a lot with there are state parts of the state park that are covered with pine, but in our particular area it's mostly oak and maple, so they drop their leaves in the wintertime. So
Mm-hmm.
we think that's why I think some of the sightings drop off after a while. And I think what happens is that they head over to the Green Mountain National Forest in Vermont, just about 10 miles away, 15 miles away, and
Okay.
there's a lot of deciduous
Okay.
fir there, and pine needles and pine bark not only provide nutrition, but they also provide some cover from the snow as well.
Right.
And if you think about it, the Native Americans, the Aboriginal primates and known Aboriginal primates here in the United States and in North America, they would have their summer homes and they would have their winter homes.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. They did. You're absolutely right. And that makes sense. That makes sense. Whether, like you said, whether it's for food or because the environment is easier, cooler, hotter, whatever it is that that person or the animal needs, in other words, they follow it. They follow it, and then they're in tune with the cycles. They can't control their environment like we do. So of course they're going to.
Exactly.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Steve, thank you so, so much for the interview. It was wonderful of you to do it. Um, I love your theories. Let me tell you something. They're very plausible and down to earth and concrete. Very
I like to,
that makes sense. In other words, for lack of a better word.
I,
And
I try to keep it real.
yeah,
You know?
very real, very real. But again, thank you so much. It was wonderful to have you on. Take care. Okay.
Okay, you as well.
Take care. Bye bye. Have a good
Talking to
night.
bye bye. You
Bye
too.
bye. So, what did you think? Oh, I love talking to him. And you know what? Well, what can I say? It's like Because, and it's true, he pointed out where there's all these different versions of what is Sasquatch, what does Sasquatch do, not do, um, is he interdimensional? God, there's a million theories that abound for Sasquatch, for Bigfoot. And believe me, I'm the first one that'll go out there to, if not outright believe, at least leave myself open to the possibility of explanations. And I'm not talking about Bigfoot, I'm talking about anything, whether it's supernatural, preternatural, anything paranormal. I'm out there, unless it's like really, really like, okay, no, I can't go that far out. But, but still, at the same time, and a lot of people, sometimes when you get into doing paranormal work, it's almost like science is a bad word. Scientists make us look bad. Scientists dismiss people that believe in ghosts or in Bigfoot or in UFOs. And you know what? Not really. Because the truth is that everybody wants the truth. Even the biggest believers, whether it's ghost or Bigfoot, you want the truth. And you're hoping at some point you're going to get actual proof. That's why people go out, let's say, on paranormal or ghost hunts with a gazillion million contraptions nowadays to try to capture proof. Okay. Same thing with Sasquatch. Now they have these trail cams, and I mean, you name it, they've got it because everybody wants proof. So I think everybody wants the truth, and uh, I would want to know the truth. And until we get that definitive, like let's say in the instance of Bigfoot where we've actually captured one, it's like okay, let's use what we have so far as evidence to form a theory that makes sense, like what he was talking about, the Sasquatch eyes. You know, one makes sense to conclude this, as far as to explain the glimmer in the eyes versus the other one. Like he said, primates are known to have this. This other one, not for primates, no mammals have it. So for him to conclude that that's what's making the eyes shine, that makes sense. And I do think that absolutely science and the paranormal, the supernatural, they all have to coexist. You can't shut down one and exclude the other. You can't. You can't. And uh, this is, it wouldn't be the first time. People, they come up with theories that make sense, and then down the road, they find out I was right, I was wrong, I have to tweak it. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. When let's say back in the 60s and the 70s, when they were writing all these books about dinosaurs, and they were saying all these things about dinosaurs being so cold-blooded and all these beliefs that they had about dinosaurs. Let's face it, we were not going to capture a dinosaur. You know, Jurassic Park, that was like a great idea, but and now as we've come forward, a lot of the theories about uh, dinosaurs have either been dismissed or improved. Like, in other words, it was a step up to understanding this is really what it is. Okay, like they found that they're more warm-blooded in some cases. That, at one time they were thinking that they wouldn't care for their young. It seems that they do. I mean, there's a bunch of theories that, let's say, in the 60s and 70s, this is not what they thought of, and now they're disproving all these types of behaviors and things about the body of dinosaurs. That if you would have said that back in the 60s or 70s, they would have said, nah, it's the same thing. You have to, until you get to that final proof, which is a body of evidence, like you have, let's say, a Bigfoot. In other words, you have to put some type of, I don't want to say disbelief, but say, okay, that is not acceptable because that doesn't, there's no, where are you coming up with that? Because if not, it'll be crazy, you know? And that's why I think I love so much what he was saying. Um, and let's face it, the people like Steve, where on this case, what he does is, the research as far as, going out there and studying Sasquatch and going out and going out and going out and going out and going out. These are the people that truly, truly have the experiences that they can build on. Okay, same thing when you go ghost hunting. You go a million times, you don't get nothing, and it's really boring, or you might get something minimal, and then you go in there. But the only way you have that a wow moment is because you go on all the boring cases or trips where nothing really happens or it's negligible, and you're like, wow. But in other words, you have to put the time and the effort into it because chances are then you're there at that one time. And the reason why I say this is some people sometimes, whether it's ghost hunting or whatever it is that you're into, they go out 3 times and if nothing happens, they want to give it up. And it's like, in something like this especially, where it's not an on-demand thing. You just can't snap your finger and say perform. I want that. Which is why it attracts people. If it was that easy to do, what's the fun in that? So I don't know about you guys, but I love talking to Steve. We had to cut the interview short because he had something come up, but I think it's super interesting what he was discussing and what his theories are, and all the knowledge and experience he's gained from being out in the field. Being out in the field. Okay. So again, guys, I hope you like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button. Okay. Also, I'm asking because I have so many people sometimes submitting stories to me that I would rather, if you have a story, whatever it might be, UFOs, Sasquatch, ghosts, you name it, whatever, film yourself and send it to me. Send it to me. Go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com. My email's on there, okay? And just send me, just basically tape yourself. If you want to do it just verbally, if you want to do just a story talking, you can do that too. Send me an MP3 file. If you want to do it with your phone, whatever, or a video file, that's fine too. Okay, as long as the audio at least is really clear, and tell me your story. I would love to hear, and it's a lot easier because I'm just getting sometimes too many stories that writing, unless you're this really creative, good writer, I know there's something being lost, what they say in translation. So I would rather get it from you guys, and I will absolutely use it in my upcoming videos. And you just put a note if you want me to keep your information anonymous, or if you want me to give out your first name, whatever the case might be. But please, I want to hear more of these stories, and I would love to get it straight from the horse's mouth. So guys, take care. Thank you so much for viewing, and have a fantastic, what's today for me? Monday. Rest of the week. Take care.